The dust settled over San Miguel like a funeral shroud as the last wagon rolled away from the courthouse steps. Mei Lin watched through the barred window of the tiny room above the saloon, her fingers pressed against the cold glass until her knuckles turned white. One by one, she had watched her sisters disappear into those wagons, their faces vacant with resignation or wet with tears. Now the street below lay empty except for tumbleweeds and the occasional drunk stumbling between the weathered buildings. She was the last one left, the last of the 47 Chinese women who had been brought to this godforsaken frontier town 6 months ago, promised work in respectable households but delivered instead to a fate worse than the poverty they had fled. The auction had taken 3 days, and with each passing hour, Mei Lin's heart had grown heavier, not because she feared her own fate, but because she had failed to save even one of her sisters from theirs. The key turned in the lock behind her, and she didn't need to look to know it was Silas Crenshaw, the man who had orchestrated their misery. His boots clicked against the wooden floor like the ticking of a death clock, and his breath reeked of whiskey and tobacco when he spoke. "Well, little flower, looks like you're the last rose in the garden," he said, his voice thick with mock sympathy. "Don't you worry none. I got a special buyer coming for you tomorrow, a cattle baron from up north who pays extra for the exotic ones." Mei Lin remained silent, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was bleeding red across the desert sky. She had learned long ago that words were wasted on men like Crenshaw. He fed on fear and desperation, and she would give him neither. "You know what your problem is," Crenshaw continued, settling into the room's only chair with a satisfied grunt. "You think you're better than this, better than the other girls who went quiet to their new homes. But pride don't put food on the table, and it sure don't keep a roof over your head." The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been the teacher among them, the one who spoke the best English, who had tried to prepare the others for what awaited them in America. She had told them stories of the Golden Mountain, of opportunities and freedom, never imagining that she was leading them all to slaughter. "I've been thinking," Crenshaw said, leaning forward with a calculating gleam in his eyes. "Maybe I should keep you for myself. You're educated, speak good English, could be useful in ways beyond the obvious." Mei Lin's reflection in the window showed no emotion, but inside, something cold and sharp settled in her chest. She had survived the journey across the ocean, the treacherous mountain passes, and the degradation of the past 6 months. She would survive this too, but not as Crenshaw's possession. The sound of spurs jingling in the street below made both of them turn toward the window. A lone figure was dismounting from a paint horse, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Mei Lin had seen him before, always at the edges of the crowd during the auctions, never bidding, never speaking. He was tall and lean, with shoulders that spoke of years of hard work and eyes that seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. "Well, I'll be damned," Crenshaw muttered, squinting down at the street. "That's Jacob Thornfield. Haven't seen him in town for months." The name meant nothing to Mei Lin, but something in Crenshaw's voice suggested it should. There was a mixture of wariness and grudging respect that she had never heard from him before. "He's probably just here for supplies," Crenshaw continued, but his voice lacked conviction. "Man keeps to himself up on that spread of his. Doesn't truck with people much." Below, the stranger tied his horse to the hitching post and stepped onto the boardwalk. His hat was pulled low, casting shadows across his face, but Mei Lin could see the determined set of his jaw. He paused at the bottom of the stairs leading to the saloon, looking up as if he could see through the walls to where she stood. "Stay here," Crenshaw ordered, already moving toward the door. "And don't get any ideas about running. Miguel's got a shotgun downstairs and he knows how to use it." The door slammed shut, and Mei Lin heard the key turn in the lock. She pressed her ear to the wooden planks, straining to hear the conversation that was surely about to take place downstairs. The saloon was mostly empty at this hour, just a few regulars nursing their drinks and playing cards. The stranger's boots echoed on the stairs, each step measured and purposeful. Voices drifted up from below, too muffled to make out individual words but clear enough to gauge the tone. Crenshaw's voice was wheedling, persuasive, the same tone he used when closing a particularly difficult deal. The stranger's responses were shorter, clipped like a man who had no patience for unnecessary words. Minutes passed like hours. Mei Lin paced the small room, her mind racing through possibilities. She had seen enough transactions over the past few days to know how these negotiations typically went. The buyer would inspect the merchandise, haggle over price, and then hand over the agreed upon sum. Within an hour, she would be riding away from San Miguel toward another form of captivity. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made her freeze. They were coming up, and she could hear Crenshaw's voice growing clearer with each step. "She's a real beauty, Mr. Thornfield, educated too. Speaks English better than most of the whites in this town, and she's got spirit, if you know what I mean. Hasn't been broken yet." The key turned in the lock, and Crenshaw pushed the door open with a theatrical flourish. Behind him stood the stranger, his hat now in his hands. Revealing a face that was younger than May, Lynn had expected but marked by the kind of weathering that came from years under the desert sun. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and when they met hers, she saw something she hadn't expected to see in a man who had come to buy her. Kindness. "Miss," he said, touching 2 fingers to his forehead in a gesture that seemed almost courtly. "My name is Jacob Thornfield." May Lynn inclined her head slightly, unsure of the proper response. In all the transactions she had witnessed, none of the buyers had bothered to introduce themselves to their purchases. "No, as I was saying," Crenshaw continued, moving to stand beside May, Lynn like a proprietor displaying his finest goods. "She's worth every penny of what I'm asking. Clean, healthy, and skilled in all the domestic arts. She'll make some man a fine wife, or serve just as well in other capacities." Jacob Thornfield's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at Crenshaw's words, but his voice remained level when he spoke. "I'd like to speak with the lady privately, if you don't mind." "Now hold on there," Crenshaw said, his smile faltering. "That's not how these things usually work. I mean, she's merchandise after all. You don't negotiate with merchandise." "I wasn't negotiating," Jacob replied, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made Crenshaw take a step back. "I was making a request. A reasonable one, I think, considering the sum we discussed." Crenshaw's eyes darted between Jacob and May Lynn, calculating the risks of refusing. Finally, he shrugged and headed for the door. "5 minutes," he said, "and don't try anything foolish. Miguel's still downstairs with that shotgun." The door closed, leaving them alone. Jacob Thornfield stood perfectly still for a long moment, his hat held loosely in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost gentle. "I want you to know," he said, "that I'm not here to buy you." The words hit May Lynn like a physical blow. She had prepared herself for many things, but not for false hope. "I don't understand," she said, her own voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here to get you out of this place," Jacob continued, "away from Crenshaw and away from this life. But I need to know that's what you want. Because if you come with me, there's no going back." May Lynn stared at him, searching his face for signs of deception. She had learned to read men well during her months in captivity, to recognize the lies they told themselves and others. But Jacob Thornfield's face was open, honest, with none of the calculating cruelty she had grown accustomed to. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "I had a sister once," he said finally. "Emily, she was about your age when she died. Consumption took her, slow and painful. Before she passed, she made me promise that I'd look out for folks who couldn't look out for themselves. Said it was the only way to make her death mean something." The raw pain in his voice was unmistakable, and May Lynn felt something in her chest loosen for the first time in months. "I'm sorry," she said. "So am I," Jacob replied. "Sorry I waited so long to do something about what's been happening in this town. Sorry I let it go on as long as I did." "What exactly are you proposing?" May Lynn asked, though part of her was afraid to hope. "I've got a ranch about 2 days' ride north of here. It's not much, but it's honest work and honest living. I need someone to help with the cooking and cleaning, and I can pay fair wages. You'd have your own room, your own space. No one would bother you, and you'd be free to leave any time you wanted." It sounded too good to be true, which in May Lynn's experience meant it probably was. And what would people say about a Chinese woman living alone with a white man? Jacob's smile was rueful. "They'd say plenty, I imagine. But the nearest neighbors are 20 miles away, and I don't much care what folks think anyway. Haven't for a long time." Before May Lynn could respond, the door burst open and Crenshaw stepped back into the room. His face was flushed with impatience and whiskey. "Time's up," he announced. "You two can get better acquainted later. Now about the money." Jacob reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a roll of bills. 300 as agreed. Crenshaw's eyes lit up at the sight of the money. "No, that's what I like to see. A man who keeps his word." He reached for the bills, but Jacob pulled them back. First, I want to see the paperwork, Jacob said. Paperwork. Crenshaw laughed nervously. What paperwork? This is a simple transaction between gentlemen. The papers that brought her here, Jacob continued, his voice hardening. The contracts, the agreements, whatever legal documentation exists. I want to see it all. Crenshaw's face went pale. No, see here, Thornfield. You can't just waltz in here and start making demands. This is how business is done in these parts. Not my business, Jacob replied. I don't deal in stolen goods or human trafficking. So either you produce the papers proving this is all legal and above board, or I walk out of here and take my money with me. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Mei Lin could see the calculation in Crenshaw's eyes, weighing the risk of losing the sale against the risk of admitting there were no legitimate papers. You know what? Crenshaw said finally, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. I don't think I'm going to sell her after all. Changed my mind. She's worth more to me than $300. Jacob's expression didn't change, but Mei Lin could see the tension in his shoulders. That's your choice, he said calmly. But I think you should consider the consequences. Consequences? Crenshaw laughed, but there was no humor in it. What consequences? You're one-man Thornfield. I've got the whole town behind me. Do you? Jacob asked. Because I've been talking to people. Sheriff Morrison, Judge Blackwood, even Mayor Hutchins. Turns out they're all very interested in where these women came from and what happened to the money that was supposed to go to their families back in China. Crenshaw's face went from pale to ashen. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell me, Silas, what do you think happens to a man who gets caught trafficking in human beings? Especially when that man has been skimming money from the territorial government. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Crenshaw's hand drifted toward the gun at his hip, but Jacob was faster. Without seeming to move quickly, he somehow had his own weapon drawn and pointed at Crenshaw's chest. I wouldn't, Jacob said quietly. Miguel's been paid to look the other way, but he won't take a bullet for you, and there are witnesses downstairs who'll testify that you drew first. Crenshaw's hand froze halfway to his gun. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. What do you want? I want you to take my money and forget this woman ever existed, Jacob said. I want you to pack up your operation and get out of San Miguel. And I want you to do it tonight. And if I refuse, then tomorrow morning, I ride to the territorial capital with a very detailed report about your activities, along with testimony from several of your former customers who are suddenly very eager to cooperate with the authorities. Crenshaw stared at Jacob for a long moment, then slowly raised his hands. You win, he said through gritted teeth. But this isn't over, Thornfield. You've made yourself a powerful enemy today. I'll live with that, Jacob replied, holstering his gun. He tossed the roll of bills onto the room's small table. Consider that payment for her freedom. Nothing more, nothing less. Crenshaw snatched up the money, his movements sharp and angry. Get out, he snarled. Both of you, and don't come back. Jacob turned to Mei Lin, his expression softer now. Do you have anything you need to take with you? Mei Lin looked around the sparse room that had been her prison for the past 6 months. There was nothing here that belonged to her, nothing that held any meaning beyond pain and degradation. No, she said, nothing. Then let's go. They walked down the stairs together, past the curious stares of the few patrons still in the saloon. Miguel stood behind the bar, his shotgun conspicuously absent. He nodded to Jacob as they passed, a gesture that seemed to carry more meaning than a simple greeting. Outside, the evening air was cool and clean after the stifling atmosphere of the saloon. Jacob's horse stood patiently at the hitching post, and beside it was a second horse, a gentle-looking mare with a side saddle. I took the liberty of arranging transportation, Jacob said. I hope you don't mind. Mei Lin approached the mare carefully. It had been years since she had ridden, but the horse seemed calm and friendly. What's her name? Buttercup, Jacob replied. She's getting on in years, but she's steady and sure-footed. Good for a long ride. They mounted their horses and rode slowly down the main street of San Miguel. Lights were beginning to flicker on in windows, and the sounds of evening life drifted from the various establishments. It was a scene that might have been peaceful under different circumstances, but Mei Lin couldn't shake the feeling that hostile eyes were watching from every shadow. Where are we going? She asked as they reached the edge of town. My ranch, Jacob replied. It's about 2 days' ride north. We'll camp tonight and reach it tomorrow evening. As they rode into the gathering darkness, Mei Lin found herself thinking about the women who had been taken before her. Her sisters in suffering, scattered across the territory like leaves in a windstorm. She wondered if any of them had found kindness in their new situations, or if they were all enduring fresh hells in unfamiliar places. "You're thinking about the others," Jacob said, as if reading her thoughts. "Yes," Mei Lin admitted. "I keep wondering if I should have done more to help them." "You did what you could," Jacob said. "Sometimes that's all anyone can do." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The desert landscape around them was harsh and unforgiving, but there was a strange beauty in its emptiness. It was a place where a person could disappear entirely, which might not be such a bad thing. "Can I ask you something?" Mei Lin said after a while. "Of course. Why didn't you try to help the others? Why wait until now?" Jacob was quiet for so long that Mei Lin began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. "Because I'm a coward," he said. "I told myself it wasn't my business, that I couldn't take on the whole world's problems. But the truth is I was afraid. Afraid of getting involved, afraid of the consequences, afraid of failing. And now I'm more afraid of doing nothing. My sister Emily used to say that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I've been doing nothing for too long." They made camp that night beside a small stream, hidden from the road by a stand of cottonwood trees. Jacob built a small fire and shared his provisions with Mei Lin's simple fare but more satisfying than anything she had eaten in months. As they sat by the flickering flames, she found herself studying his face in the firelight. "Tell me about your ranch," she said. Jacob's expression softened. "It's not much to look at, but it's home. About 1,000 acres of good grazing land, a decent house, and a barn that's seen better days. I run about 200 head of cattle, mostly longhorns. It's a hard life, but it's honest work. Do you live there alone?" "I do now. Had a partner for a while, but he moved on to greener pastures, found himself a wife in California, and decided ranch life wasn't for him." Jacob stirred the fire with a stick, sending sparks up into the night sky. "Gets lonely sometimes, but I've got my books and my horses, and the work keeps me busy." "Books," Jacob smiled. "I know, not what you'd expect from a rough cowboy. But Emily taught me to read when I was young, and I've never lost the habit. I've got a whole shelf of them back at the ranch. Shakespeare, Dickens, even some poetry." The idea of this weathered rancher reading poetry by lamplight was somehow both surprising and endearing. Mei Lin found herself wondering what other unexpected depths he might possess. "What about you?" Jacob asked. "What did you do before you came here?" "I was a teacher," Mei Lin said. "In a small village outside Shanghai. I taught children to read and write both Chinese and English. It wasn't much, but it was honest work and I was good at it." "What made you leave?" The question opened old wounds, but Mei Lin found herself wanting to answer. "My father died and left debts, more than my family could pay. A man came to our village, offering work in America for young women. He said we could earn enough money to pay off the debts and still have some left over to send home to our families." "And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him," Mei Lin said. "We all did. The alternative was to watch my mother and younger brother starve." Jacob nodded, understanding. Hope can be a dangerous thing when you're desperate. Indeed it can. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. Finally, Jacob banked the coals and laid out his bedroll on one side of the camp. "You can sleep by the fire," he said. "I'll keep watch for a while. Make sure we weren't followed." "Thank you," Mei Lin said, though she doubted she would be able to sleep. Too much had happened, too much had changed in the space of a few hours. But exhaustion proved stronger than anxiety, and she did sleep, deeply and dreamlessly for the first time in months. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon cooking over the rebuilt fire. Jacob was already up and moving around the camp, his movements efficient and practiced. He had watered the horses and loaded their gear, and breakfast was nearly ready. "Morning," he said when he saw her stirring. "Hope you slept well." "Better than I have in a long time," Mei Lin admitted. "Thank you." They ate quickly and broke camp, eager to put more distance between themselves and San Miguel. The morning air was crisp and clear, and the horses seemed as eager as their riders to be moving. As they rode, Jacob pointed out various landmarks and told stories about the country they were passing through. He had a good storyteller's voice, and Mei Lin found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the journey. "That mesa there," he said, pointing to a flat, topped hill in the distance. The Apache call it the place where the eagles dance. They say it's sacred, that the spirits of their ancestors gather there during the full moon. Do you believe that? Mei Lin asked. I believe the land holds memories, Jacob said. Good ones and bad ones. Places where important things happened, they keep something of that energy. Maybe that's all spirits are, just echoes of the past. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. The sun was high and hot, and the landscape around them shimmered with heat waves. In the distance, Mei Lin could see mountains rising like purple shadows against the sky. How much farther? She asked. We should reach the ranch by evening, Jacob replied. See those mountains? My spread is in the valley just this side of them. Good water, good grass, and far enough from town that folks mostly leave me alone. As they rode on, Mei Lin found herself thinking about what lay ahead. Jacob had spoken of employment, of fair wages and honest work, but she knew that nothing in life was ever that simple. There would be challenges, complications, perhaps even dangers she couldn't yet imagine. Are you having second thoughts? Jacob asked, as if reading her mind again. Perhaps, Mei Lin admitted. It's hard to trust in good fortune when you've seen so little of it. I understand, Jacob said. But sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. Sometimes that's the only way to find out if there's solid ground on the other side. The sun was setting behind them when they finally crested a ridge and saw the ranch spread out in the valley below. It was larger than Mei Lin had expected, with a substantial house, several outbuildings, and corrals filled with horses and cattle. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and warm yellow light spilled from the windows. Home, Jacob said simply. They rode down into the valley as the last light faded from the sky. The horses seemed to sense they were nearly home, picking up their pace and pricking their ears forward. As they approached the house, a dog came running out to greet them, barking and wagging its tail. That's Rex, Jacob said. He's friendly, but he's got a good bark when strangers come around. The house was larger than it had appeared from the ridge, built of stone and timber with a wide porch that wrapped around two sides. It looked solid and permanent, like something that had been built to last for generations. Jacob dismounted and came around to help Mei Lin down from her horse. Welcome to Thornfield Ranch, he said. I hope you'll be happy here. As they walked toward the house, Mei Lin caught sight of a figure in the doorway. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. About time you got back, she said to Jacob. I was beginning to worry. Martha, I'd like you to meet Mei Lin, Jacob said. Mei Lin, this is Martha Hendricks. She's been taking care of this place and me for longer than either of us cares to admit. Martha stepped forward with a warm smile. Welcome, dear. I've got supper ready in a room prepared for you. You must be exhausted after that long ride. Mei Lin felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness in the woman's voice. Thank you, she managed to say. None of that now, Martha said, taking her arm gently. You're safe here, and that's what matters. Come on, let's get you inside and fed. As they entered the house, Mei Lin was struck by its warmth and comfort. The main room was large and welcoming, with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books. It felt like a home, not just a house. I'll take care of the horses, Jacob said. Martha, why don't you show Mei Lin to her room? Martha led her up a wooden staircase to a small but comfortable room with a window that looked out over the valley. The bed was made with clean sheets and a warm quilt, and there was a pitcher of water and a basin for washing. I hope this will do, Martha said. The wash house is out back if you want a proper bath, and there's hot water on the stove. Supper will be ready in about an hour. When Martha left, Mei Lin sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. It was simple but clean, with none of the oppressive atmosphere of the room above the saloon. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe freely. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. Martha entered with an armload of clothes. I thought you might like something fresh to wear, she said. These belonged to Jacob's sister. She was about your size, I think. Mei Lin fingered the soft fabric of a blue dress. Are you sure it's all right? Of course, dear. Emily would have wanted them to be put to good use. Martha's expression grew sad for a moment. She was a lovely girl. Kind and gentle, just like you. After Martha left, Mei Lin changed into the clean dress. It fit well and felt wonderful against her skin after months of wearing the same rough clothing. She washed her face and hands, then made her way downstairs to find Jacob and Martha setting the table. You look much better, Jacob said with a smile. That dress suits you. They sat down to a meal of roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables, simple food but prepared with care and served with genuine hospitality. As they ate, Martha asked gentle questions about Mei Lin's background and journey, her manner inviting but not intrusive. I was a teacher, Mei Lin found herself saying. In China, before I came here. A teacher, Martha exclaimed. How wonderful, we could use more educated folks around here. The nearest school is 30 miles away, and most of the children in these parts get no proper education at all. Maybe we should think about changing that, Jacob said thoughtfully. There are enough families scattered around the county to support a school, if we could find the right teacher. The conversation continued late into the evening, ranging over topics from books to farming to the future of the territory. Mei Lin found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, enjoying the simple pleasure of intelligent conversation with kind people. Finally, Martha declared it was time for bed. We keep early hours here, she said. The cattle don't care if you're tired, and the day starts at dawn. As Mei Lin prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. A day ago, she had been a prisoner facing an uncertain and frightening future. Now she was in a comfortable room in a warm house, surrounded by people who seemed genuinely kind. It was too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But for tonight, at least, she would allow herself to hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Jacob had not exaggerated about the amount of work involved in running a ranch. There were cattle to tend, horses to train, fences to mend, and 100 other tasks that needed attention. Martha showed Mei Lin how to help with the cooking and cleaning, and she threw herself into the work with enthusiasm. It felt good to be useful again, to contribute something meaningful to the household. The physical labor was hard, but it was honest work, and she found satisfaction in tasks well done. Jacob treated her with respect and kindness, never making her feel like a servant or an outsider. But it was the evenings that Mei Lin treasured most. After the day's work was done, they would sit by the fire and read, or talk about books they had read, or simply enjoy each other's company. Jacob had an extensive library, and he encouraged her to borrow anything that caught her interest. You really should think about that school, Martha said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. There are at least a dozen families within riding distance who would send their children if there was a proper teacher. I don't know, Mei Lin said. Would people accept a Chinese teacher? The right people would, Jacob said firmly. And those are the only ones who matter. The idea was appealing. But Mei Lin couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in a bubble that might burst at any moment. She had learned not to trust in good fortune, and part of her was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped 3 weeks later, on a hot afternoon, when Jacob was out checking the cattle in the far pasture. Mei Lin was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard horses approaching at a fast pace. She looked up to see 3 riders coming down the valley road, their horses lathered with sweat. Martha appeared at the kitchen door, wiping her hands on her apron. Who do you suppose that is? She asked. Mei Lin's heart sank as she recognized the lead rider. It was Crenshaw, and he looked angry. The 2 men with him were strangers, but they had the hard look of professional gunmen. Martha, Mei Lin said urgently, you need to get inside and lock the door. What's wrong? Martha asked, but she was already moving toward the house. Those men are here for me, Mei Lin said. Please, just go inside and stay there. Crenshaw and his companions reined in their horses in the yard, dust swirling around them. The gunmen dismounted and took positions on either side of their employer, their hands resting casually on their weapons. Well, well, Crenshaw said with a nasty smile. Look what we have here. The little flower playing house with her protector. What do you want, Crenshaw? Mei Lin asked, though she already knew the answer. I want what's mine, Crenshaw replied. You cost me a lot of money, girl. My business in San Miguel is finished thanks to your boyfriend and his big mouth. I had to pull up stakes and move on, leave a lot of profitable arrangements behind. I don't belong to you, Mei Lin said, trying to keep her voice steady. Oh, but you do, Crenshaw said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. This here's a legal contract signed and witnessed. Says you owe me 5 years of service to pay off your passage to America. That means you're mine until I say otherwise. That contract is illegal, Mei Lin said. It's slavery, and it's not enforceable. Maybe not in the big cities, Crenshaw admitted. But out here, the law is what we make it. And I've got friends in the territorial government who see things my way. One of the gunmen stepped forward, a tall man with a cruel face and empty eyes. You want us to take her now, boss? Not yet, Cole, Crenshaw said. I want to give her a chance to come along peacefully. Wouldn't want to damage the merchandise. I'm not going anywhere with you, May, Lynn said. Oh, but you are, Crenshaw replied. Because if you don't, I'll burn this place to the ground and kill everyone in it. Starting with the old woman. The threat hung in the air like smoke. May Lynn felt trapped, caught between her own safety and the safety of the people who had shown her kindness. She couldn't let Martha be hurt because of her past. All right, she said finally. I'll come with you. But you have to promise to leave them alone. Now that's more like it, Crenshaw said with satisfaction. I knew you'd see reason eventually. As May Lynn started toward the horses, she heard the sound of a single rider approaching at a gallop. She looked up to see Jacob racing toward them, his face dark with anger and determination. Well, well, Crenshaw said. Here comes the hero. Right on time. Jacob reined in his horse and dismounted in one fluid motion. His eyes took in the scene instantly, and his hand moved to rest on his gun. You're trespassing. Crenshaw, he said. I suggest you leave before you regret it. I don't think so, Crenshaw replied. I'm here to collect what's mine, and I'm not leaving without her. She's not yours, Jacob said flatly. She's a free woman. Not according to this contract, Crenshaw said, waving the paper. Signed, sealed? She owes me 5 years of service. That contract isn't worth the paper it's printed on, Jacob said. It's involuntary servitude, and it's illegal under territorial law. Maybe so, Crenshaw said, but I've got 2 guns that say otherwise, and I've got friends in high places who'll back my play. You're wrong about that, Jacob said. I sent